Continuing our lesson on ecology, we know that an ecosystem is the abiotic and the biotic interacting. And in the first video, we looked in depth at the abiotic side of things, particularly nitrogen, carbon, sulfur, and water, and how they cycle through our systems. Now, they are important because they support the biotic component. So let's take a moment and study the biotic component. The biotic component is broken down into multiple trophic levels. So you'll hear this trophic pyramid, right? And you're probably already familiar with this, and your book does a nice job of explaining it. But at the bottom of this pyramid, we have our autotrophs. Those are the ones that convert energy from the sun into usable energy for the rest of us, aka part of the carbon cycle through photosynthesis. So our producers are all of our plants, right? Heterotrophs then are the consumers, and we have several levels of heterotrophs. We have primary, secondary, and tertiary heterotrophs, or we usually call them consumers. So we have our producers on the bottom, and then we have our consumers as we go up this pyramid. Now, why is it shaped in the form of a pyramid? The first law of thermodynamics, right, says that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So if this is an energy pyramid, or if this represents energy, it should be a square. Energy can't be created or destroyed, correct? But it's a pyramid because of the second law of thermodynamics, and that is that it can change forms. So energy then is lost as heat, or through that metabolic process of converting it from one of these levels to another. Therefore, we start with 100% energy in our plants, right? But when the primary consumers consume it, only 10% of that original 100% goes into biomass at this level. And we keep going down with each level, and therefore we get a shape of a pyramid. And so at the top of this pyramid are tertiary consumers, which is where we would fall, right? We eat both plants and animals, primary and secondary consumers. Because of that, we end up with less overall biomass at this level than at this level. Obviously, on Earth, we have much more biomass at the producer level than at the tertiary consumer. Remember, that is not per individual, that's per population or per group of populations. Okay, and so we've been talking about ecosystems. Now I want to broaden out and introduce you to a term called ecoregions and how that relates to a term that we'll refer to as biomes. So remember that an ecosystem is what? The abiotic and the biotic interacting in a way that sustains life. So there's a lot of words here all at once. An ecoregion then are areas of land that reoccur in a predictable fashion on similar sites. So basically they're an assemblage of ecosystems or landscapes. So they're bigger than ecosystems. They're a region that has some kind of predictability about what you would find in that region, mostly related to climate and topography. Sometimes we refer to ecoregions as biomes, but generally biomes are more correctly defined as larger areas where several ecoregions might be present, such as the North American biome. So these colors here represent different ecoregions, but our whole continent might be a biome. Similarly, as I mentioned, ecoregions may be made up of several ecosystems. In fact, they usually are. So an ecoregion is a way of classifying our landscape, a hierarchical classification. So we can divide large areas of land based on climatic factors, based on landform, and potential dominant vegetation. And so as you look from one ecoregion to another, you might not really know that you're transitioning. But the transition zones are referred to as ecotones. And I would say we also use this word ecotones when we transition from one ecosystem to another. So that can be a little bit confusing. Usually your ecotones are very biologically rich because they have a little bit of both systems contained within an ecotone. So why do we want to define an ecoregion? It provides a better foundation for sustainable management of land and wildlife. We can make conclusions and draw conclusions based on knowing what the ecoregion is because of its similarity in function to another area of the same ecoregion. And that will make a little bit more sense when we look at some maps here in a minute. When you have ecoregions, you want to think about it as the whole system. We cannot manage one ecoregion without it impacting others. So when we can interlink these areas of land, we realize that we have a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Each part separately does not give you the same value, even if you added them all up together, as all those parts working together. And then different management agencies have adopted either ecoregions or some other systems of defining large landscapes in order to make management decisions. And the U.S. Forest Service has adopted this ecoregion system, and that's why we're going to focus on it today. So this cool guy named Bailey, who actually was from Colorado, and if memory serves me correctly, oh yes it is, he actually worked right here in Fort Collins, Colorado. He created this model in the 1980s and 1990s. And what he did is he goes through three categories. The domain, which is defined by climate, of which we have 3 in North America, or 3 in the United States, I should say. Then we have 14 divisions that's based on both climate and physiography. Okay, so the physical landscape. That might be elevation, might be slope, topography. And then province, where it's defined by climate and physiography for sure, but then also by dominant vegetation types that are likely to occur on that, in that spot. Of course, the vegetation is dependent so much upon climate and physiography, but you can get some predictability there because of that. And we have approximately 36. So let's take a look at those. So the domains in the United States are the dry domain, which we're definitely in here in Colorado, the humid temperate domain that takes up most of the rest of the United States, and down here on the southern tip of Florida we get the humid tropical domain. Then we break that down into your 14 divisions, remember now based on physiography as well as climate, and we start getting some distinctions here, and it's not quite as uniform. So you can see that here in Colorado we're in the Front Range. I guess that'd be somewhere right in here. We're going to be similar to parts of Utah and parts of Idaho based on our topography and climate. Then we break this down even farther into the provinces, whoops, too far, and it gets a little muddled and confusing. We have 30 some provinces, and we're looking at dominant vegetation types, and even this gets broken down even farther. But if you think about it, if I'm making a management decision here in maybe eastern Colorado, yeah, I can assume that it actually might work in northern Montana too, based on looking at these provinces. So that's why it helps kind of from a management point of view. Now, what works out here in, I'm not that great with where this would be, but let's say maybe West Virginia or something. Those management decisions probably aren't going to be equally worked out over here in Colorado because we're in such different provinces. Okay, so here, my slides are going kind of fast. I don't know why it won't stay there. So we have our 14 divisions spelled out for us here. And then in Colorado, this map over here to the right just zooms in and shows you a very detailed map that has been broken down for different landscapes and vegetation types in Colorado. You can see the Front Range. Here's our ponderosa pine forest, right where we occur. Similar up and down the Front Range until you get just south of Colorado Springs. So if you want to look at this in a little bit more detail, you could pick an animal, maybe one from our mammal list, look in a field guide at where its geographic range occurs, and then overlay that with an ecoregion map and decide, does it occur only in one ecoregion or does it occur across multiple ecoregions? And knowing that then might influence how we would manage for that species. It also might influence how the biogeochemical cycles happen. Remember, we talked about geochemical cycling, then we throw in the bio. That just means once that chemical has gone through some of the biotic communities, we can add another little piece to the word and get biogeochemical cycling. So all of these things play a role together. How the animal uses its environment is dependent upon what the environment is. And what the environment is highly dependent upon the abiotic components of its environment. And so we need to be thinking about this as a whole system. All right, I'm going to stop here and we'll pick up with part 3 on ecological succession.